Welcome to the Free Range Families Podcast, where we, Britt
and Christina, show you the beauty of homeschooling through a lens of faith
and freedom,
and always a bit of humor.
Hi, Nicki.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. We're so excited that you took the time out of your homeschooling day to come talk to us.
Thank you. I am very excited about this conversation today.
So are we.
It's great to have, someone with such great experience homeschooling and who's such an advocate for homeschooling on this podcast. So
more experience than we have, and we'll talk about that. So that's neat. Yes. So I'm going to kick it off. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So we have some questions for you. You've been homeschooling for about 24 years, right?
That's right.
Is it longer? Okay.
24.
Were you a homeschooler yourself? Just a little bit about your background. How'd you get started?
Yeah. So I was a homeschool kid starting in 1983. My mom and dad took my sister and me out of school, and we started homeschooling. And the first month we were homeschooled, and this was in Oklahoma, by the way, in September of that year, we had just a few weeks under our belt, and then the police came to the front door one morning and arrested my parents for truancy.
Oh my.
And the interesting thing is Oklahoma has always had homeschool freedom protected in its constitution since statehood. But we didn't know that. No one else knew it. They just knew that we were not at school. And so my parents and my aunt, who was also homeschooling in the same town, were arrested that day. And by the end of the day, they were released thanks to lawyers who had heard about the case and had jumped on it. And this was sort of the beginnings of HSLDA. So
yes, I was going to
hadn't formed yet, but
Right.
that's who helped my parents and my aunt. So that was my introduction to homeschooling.
Wow. Why was it, do you mind if I ask what your family's background is and what their decision was to homeschool you kids? Because, it was very rare. Back then.
It was. Well, so I'll back up a little bit. My mom had me when she was 14 and dropped out of high school at that point. And so she never went on to get her diploma. She lived a very wild life of drugs and alcohol, partying, just, not ideal for raising children. And when I was 8 years old, she got married to my stepdad, and they became Christians. They were, I always say they were radically saved, and they decided, to go all out, to change their complete lifestyle. And so they were introduced to homeschooling. And because of my mom's background, she said, that's what we need.
Yep.
I don't want my kids to go to junior high. I don't want them to go to high
that
school.
same path, right?
You're breaking the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, my parents were pretty radical. We didn't have a TV. We didn't go to school. We didn't celebrate Halloween. There's so many things that, they threw everything out and started from scratch. And so homeschooling was part of that. And they were mentored by a really neat couple that lived locally. And so they just walked them through the process and said, you can do this. It doesn't matter that you don't have a high school diploma. And that's all my dad did have. My stepdad had only a high school diploma. And so they were just, they held them by the hand and showed them how to do it and walked them through. And here we are.
That's an amazing story, because it's like the full package, Christina.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have a college degree to teach your children.
Right.
And they totally reinvented their lives. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So then you just naturally wanted to homeschool your own kids.
I did. I enjoyed my homeschool years. And so that was from the time I was 11 until my junior year. And for my senior year, I went to a local private school where all of my friends were going because they said, you should come, it's fun. And so I did. My mom and dad let me do that. And so I graduated at a little private school for my senior year. But I loved my homeschool years so much. And before I even had kids, I knew that's what I wanted to do with them. And so I did, never looked back.
That is awesome.
So how many kids have you gone through the homeschooling process with?
I have 5. and 3 are graduated and adults now. And so my youngest 2 are 16 and 13. So we're still working on those 2.
Yes, we both have I have 14-year-old and
I have a 13 and 15, so right there with you.
And then I'm still in the younger years, 11 and 7. So
okay, that's fun. I mean, all the years have their fun. They're all different, but there's some really cool things about all the different stages.
We're in the argumentative rhetoric phase at 14.
Yep.
I like the teen years.
Great,
the teen years are fun. I've always liked the teen years. I was a high school teacher, so for me, it's like I love the relationship building at the teen years.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I taught first grade, so I like. We're opposites, if you can't tell. Yeah, very much. Yeah, I like doing lots of crafts, and glitter is always happening. Yeah.
I used to do all that. I loved it when my kids were young, and we did all the hands-on stuff. But I've also really enjoyed the teenage years because, like you said, the relationships and the conversations and just shaping their worldview and preparing them to be adults is such a really neat privilege. But it's fun because they're all different, and so it's fun. It's not always fun, I will say that.
No, we have our good days and our bad days.
We have our good days and bad days,
but overall, it's a really cool thing.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. Okay, now you're on.
All right. So this is probably a really hard question because I don't think we could even answer it. But do you have a favorite curriculum or what would you recommend to people that you think is great, maybe per stage, things like that?
Well, since I've been doing this for a long time, I have finally settled on things that I always recommend.
Okay.
So if you want to go in stages, for younger kids, one of the things I always loved was 5 in a row. Okay. I did that with, I think, 4 out of 5 of my kids, but I may have started even with my youngest one kind of late. She was, the oldest. My oldest one was, unfortunately, the guinea pig. But
as they are.
Yes.
I did 5 in a row with them and loved it, and even just applied that same concept to books that were not in the 5 in a row curriculum. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, basically just taking a good children's book and turning it into an educational experience by reading it over and over and pulling different things out through the week. So I love it. In fact, awesome. I have 2 grandchildren now, and I told my daughter, I said, you got to start with 5 in a row, teach them to read and start with 5 in a row. As far as teaching to read, I used only 2 different things, and it was with different kids based on their needs. I used the Abeka phonics program for some of my kids, and I used Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons.
I love that. Yeah. Both my boys learned with that book, and my husband, he taught them with it and swears by it. It's our gift that anytime we have nieces and nephews that are starting to be, that's our gift to them.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. In fact, my boys I have 2 boys and 3 girls. So my boys learned with 100 Easy Lessons, and all my girls did better with Abeka.
Interesting.
And so, you never know. So I did. Yeah, just use what works. But I do just highly recommend a phonics program.
Yes. I love this.
I know, because we're big on phonics.
We're former teachers, and it was sight word craze, and it totally. Parents don't understand when they come and they're like, hey, our kids aren't reading. They're like, can you please stop teaching them sight words, because it's completely messing up their brains, or even causing dyslexia.
Oh yeah,
it's not a good situation. And so just go back to phonics.
Yes, amen.
Yeah. Since you're in the right interview here.
Good grouping here.
I think most teachers and former teachers agree on that. I know there are some that don't, but I think it's the bureaucracy that keeps pushing the opposite of phonics. Anyway, have y'all read?
No, we agree completely.
In the right setting. I truly believe it's purposeful, because they're trying to dumb us down in school. So, in the Rockefellers, even if you go way back, they were taught sight words, and they admitted they could not read. Yeah. And so it actually teaches you to be stupid.
Right.
It doesn't. Terrible. I'm saying this out loud, but it is not.
You got word mommy, but it's good. Yes. Part of, I think, the reason phonics is so important is that it's a critical thinking
Yes.
way of learning, as opposed to just a memorization, rote memorization. And I think that is key, to teaching our children, is teaching them critical thinking, teaching them problem solving.
And testing sight words makes zero sense. And this is coming from teachers. It just makes no sense. Why are you testing kindergartners on 5 million sight words? Because they memorize it. I remember testing. They memorize the way it sounds and not actually the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Have y'all read Crimes of the Educators?
Yes. Actually, so I work with Alex Newman for Public School Exit, so I get to see his face every Tuesday. Yes, so I've read all his books.
That's awesome.
He is amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
And he goes into it in his new book, too.
Oh, yeah, good. I have not read that one yet. It's on my long to be read list.
Yes.
But I always recommend that one to people that aren't really sure about why they should homeschool. That one is at the top of the list. If you read that, you'll be very angry and you will take your kids home.
Yes. I think that it needs to be louder, though, because there's still this idea that sight words are the go-to for reading.
Yep, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's in my town. They give out awards for the most sight words memorized. So, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, memorization. That's not the same as education.
No, not at all.
So we cut you off a little bit. Did you have any recommended curriculum? We got.
Yeah.
Can't help it.
So after I usually just teach my kids to read first. I don't do like the whole kindergarten curriculum. I focus on reading. And then when it seems like they've caught on, where, they can pick up an easy book or read some easy sentences without too much help, then we go ahead and introduce math. And we've always used Math-U-See. I have not experimented with much else. I've never used Saxon. We did teaching textbooks for 1 year, but the daughter that I used it for didn't like it, so we just never went back. And so we've been a Math-U-See family for a very long time, so I really can't compare it to other ones, but we've always liked it.
Yeah.
And then, then I start my kids after reading on math. And then around upper elementary, I will introduce them to grammar. I don't believe in grammar for 12 years. So grammar and then writing, and I prefer IEW for all of that. That's my favorite.
We've used IEW before, yep.
Yeah.
And then for history, I love Mystery of History. And
I've heard of this.
I like to cycle through it a couple of times with each of my kids. It's a chronological world history, and it's got a biblical worldview. Treats the Bible as history, which I think is very important.
Yes.
And then for science, a couple of things I like are Berean builders, and I also like the 101 series by, I think it's Westfield Studios. And really everything I use is either written by Christians or is specifically from a biblical worldview. But that's what I've narrowed my choices down to over the many years, and I'm very comfortable with those. And every now and then I'll throw in some extra stuff too, but those are my favorite
go-tos.
Yeah.
So my brain goes like this, Nikki, you have to, and I have a thought. So I have a question though, because I get it a lot from especially moms with little ones, for struggling readers. Have you had that experience before, like within your own kids? And then what would you recommend for parents that are really struggling with their kids reading?
Well, I will say that the first thing I recommend is to slow down if your child is struggling, because some kids are not ready when the government says they are ready.
Okay.
And so I did learn that the hard way, but my girls, all three, struggled to catch on, and it wasn't until they were about 8 or 9 years old that they actually read.
That's exactly the same with my daughter. That's funny.
It sounds scary and behind, but it worked, and they all read just fine now. 2 of them are adults, and they read classics for fun, and they read poetry. Awesome. So it didn't harm them in any way to slow down and let them do it at their own pace. And then my youngest is 13, and she reads pretty well. I mean, it always depends on them finding something that they're interested in, and she's just gotten to the point where she finds things that she likes, and now she's ready to read for pleasure. And I really wasn't sure that was going to happen, but all kids can learn to love to read when they find the subject matter that they like.
Yeah,
So
that is
Very true.
my first recommendation is just to slow down and take it easy. Maybe give your kids a break and then go back to it in a few months and see if they just need to mature.
Okay.
But obviously, sometimes there is a learning problem, and so you can check into something in your local area for testing for learning disabilities and see if that's a problem. And also vision therapy. Sometimes that helps.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
there's maybe a dyslexia problem or something like that. But
We've had to use those
very
little
often, I
finger
think
things.
it's just people are rushing their kids too much.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're conditioned to following these standards that we all think they're supposed to.
5 years
Yeah.
old. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I only have one child that read at 5. One of my 3 kids read at 5. And then the rest,
Mine were both early, but they wanted it. And they were reading by crazy enough 3.5.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But
my boys were that
they
way.
wanted to.
Yeah.
It was absolutely not a push. It was just they were trying to do it, and so we just let them go with it. And
That's how my
Yep.
boys were, and it's opposite from what people believe, that boys are slower and girls are faster.
Yeah.
My boys read early; they were working on it at 4, so
yeah,
Yep. No,
they wanted to.
yeah.
It's very dependent on your child.
But it also
is.
took them probably till 7 or 8 to find the genre that
Right.
and to get into a reading level where they could get to books, because especially for boys, there's not a lot of really interesting young reading books for them that captures their interests. And then once they got into a higher reading level to get to that
Yeah.
level, it was like it was just
Took off.
it was like overnight. Oh my gosh, they won't stop reading. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
All right.
exactly.
So then I kind of echo that. Just don't rush your kids
Yeah.
and kind of follow their lead where
Where they're at.
Okay.
All right,
right.
are we ready to get into some heavy hitting stuff?
I hope so. Okay. Well, first I want to ask about your summit. So can
Yes.
you tell, because we missed it. Was it online?
It was, and it
Okay.
wasn't mine, but I was one of the speakers, and
Oh, okay.
I was just participating in it. So
Got it. Okay.
it was an online summit for parents, and it had some really cool talks about grace. It's all about that, but all the different ways that parents need grace
Yes.
with little things and with really big and heavy things. And that's what it was focusing on. It was really neat.
Does it happen every year? I'm curious just because
This was my first time to participate, but I think it's been
Okay.
an annual thing for 2 or 3 years already.
Okay.
So,
That's
yeah,
neat. That's a really neat resource, especially around this time
Yes.
for parents.
It is. And
Yeah.
online is convenient.
Yes,
It is.
it's convenient. Okay, well then going heavier, go for it, Christina.
So one thing that I think is one of the biggest threat to homeschoolers moving forward is autonomy. Giving away freedoms that we have worked so hard to gain in exchange for free government handouts in the world, in the form of
Yes.
education vouchers.
So we kind of just made our mind, but you touched on it in the very beginning. I mean, look at how hard you guys fought for
Yeah.
freedoms in homeschooling in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so,
So we wanted to jump right into school choice, vouchers, ESA, your thoughts.
school choice. I don't like school choice.
School choice.
Okay, yes. I like educational freedom, but just because school choice has a connotation that kind of ties into government regulation, but that's what we wanted to pick your brain on it.
Well, the first thing I try to tell people is I try to define school choice, and it does mean education freedom, but politicians are co-opting that, and it means government subsidies for education.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing to remember is now it has 2 meanings, and you need to know what both of them are, and you need to know what whoever is using it, you need to know which definition they're using. And
Yes.
so most of the time when someone says we need universal school choice, they are talking about education subsidized by the government.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is a big no. So
Agreed.
a lot of people just don't understand. They just think, hey, if I want to go to the other public school across town, that's what school choice means. And yeah, in some cases that is what it means. But really, if you hear a politician talk about it, and if you read legislation in any state, there's money involved. It's not just you moving across town to a different public school. They're talking about funding private school and homeschooling, as
Yes.
you guys in Arizona well know.
So we
So-
know this. However, we're trying to, in a grace-filled way, educate our friends, because we have a big community, and ESA has taken off rampant, like fast, like a fire.
I'm sure.
We are the minority.
We are definitely some of the only ones who do not do ESA.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And it's just because of, and if you look at Alex Newman's latest book, he talks about his experience in Sweden, and it just kind of, and how that all, and it's literally almost exactly the same as what's happening here in Arizona. So
I'm glad he's doing that.
Yes, and so he's very outspoken about it, but it still is, we need some sort of dialogue where we can educate parents on the difference of school choice in that way, and school choice and the freedom aspect. So
there's some things that people really need to get clear, and it's simple things like when they say an ESA is just money following the child.
Yeah.
That's not true. It's government following the child, because whatever math people want to try to do, they're giving money away for private school, which includes homeschooling too in most states. And when all of the schools are under the same funding, they're under the same umbrella, and the government is that umbrella. And if it's so important to ask people, why do you want out of your public school? Everybody has, there's multiple reasons to get out of public school. But if you ask a person, why do you want to get out of your public school? And they tell you, then you should say, well, then why do you want the public school in charge of your private school?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's basically what's happening. If you're trying to leave for any reason, whatever the problem is, but you want the government to come with you, then that problem is eventually going to show up at your door too. It may not be right away. It may take years. But what's happening is all school will be public school when it's publicly funded. And I just don't think people see it that way. They just think, hey, I'm already paying taxes.
Yeah, the rhetoric is, it's my money. I pay taxes, so I should get it back. And then I try to come to the understanding, help them understand that once you pay taxes, it's not your money, it's government's money. So it's a different kind
Every
of...
time.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yes.
It's also important to have people do the math, Ask someone, how much do you pay in property taxes? If you think you're getting your tax dollars back, how much do you pay in property taxes? Is that the same amount that the state is promising you?
No.
Usually no. They're promising a lot more than you're paying.
Yeah.
So where's the rest of that coming from? That's not your tax dollars. That's yours and the neighbor on your left and the neighbor on your right and the neighbor upstairs. The people that don't have kids in school at all, that's their tax dollars too.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you realize this is taking from your neighbor to pay for your horseback riding and ballet and whatever books you decide that your children might read this year,
Yes.
And I don't think people do the math, because I've done it in Texas. Every time they introduce a bill, which they haven't passed school choice here yet, but they keep trying, and every bill that's introduced is government grows in every single one of those bills. And the last one that they tried in Texas was basically they were going to set up a new fund. So it's not even about your tax dollars for property taxes anymore. They just said, we're going to set up a whole new fund for this, and it's going to come out of the Texas General Fund. Okay. So you can just drop that argument and realize you're expanding government now, and the government is actually giving you money for your private school. So obviously every state has different legislation, but people need to be aware of what the wording is in that legislation, because
and it's everything we fought.
Promise is not what's happening.
No.
And I think a lot of people don't realize, like here in Arizona, you have to actually unenroll as a homeschooler. You are no longer a homeschooler when you are on the ESA program. Therefore, you are agreeing that you are part of the regulation, whatever that may be that they choose to add in. And that was the number one. When the ESA came out and my husband and I looked at it, we looked at it purely from a legal standpoint, and that stood out to us, and we were just hard no, because that means that in order to take the money we would then have to agree that we are not homeschooling our children. We are a private school. No, thank you.
That is super important for people to understand.
Yes. So we actually just signed an affidavit. We're pretty good. I mean, in my heart, I'm hoping it sticks, but we're pretty good about our homeschooling freedoms in Arizona. But that whole implementation of ESA was, no, you actually rip up your affidavit and you sign into the ESA program. So now you're an ESA student, not a homeschooler. And in the eyes of the government in Arizona, you're not looked at as a homeschooler anymore once you're in the ESA program.
Which means homeschool freedom does not apply to you.
Exactly.
Correct.
When people say, oh, well, there's not that many regulations and I can pick my curriculum. If you're not even a homeschooler anymore, you've already given up some freedom. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yes. No, you have given up your freedom. And I think that there's, that sphere of control, especially biblically for me, I don't want to have, I'm supposed to be raising my children, not the government. So there's a very big separation for me morally and ethically too, and taking, money. It would be amazing to have that money to pay for everything that we have, but it's like the cheese and the trap,
It is.
Yeah.
It is just like that.
Yeah, it really is. But that kind of, and I'm going all over
We're
the place.
going all over the place here, but that's fine.
I wanted to kind of talk about, so we have that in place, but now there's this new talk about, hey, dismantling Department of Education and then getting a $10,000 tax credit. That's what Trump is saying. Well, he said multiple things.
Yeah,
so,
he did.
Yeah. So do you have any insight on this and unpacking or your opinion about how things are going to look moving forward for homeschooling?
I do. First of all, I'm really excited if the Department of Education is actually dismantled. I'm a little hesitant to think that might happen, but I'm all for it.
Yep.
And so I guess I don't understand how that's going to happen and what entity is going to be in charge of these tax credits.
She's reading my mind.
I know.
So I don't know. I mean, I know he's a politician and they say all kinds of things. And I know people want freedom in education, but what they don't understand is we've already got it. It just means that you have to pay for whatever your choice is. And so I understand that Trump is trying to appeal to all the parents and they do need options. But number one, yes, let's get rid of the Department of Education. Number two, the $10,000 tax credit seems less threatening to homeschool freedom.
Agreed.
But many years ago, I wrote a blog post, and I'll send you the link so you can share it when this podcast goes live. But Ted Cruz has very often introduced bills for a homeschool tax credit, and so a 529 plan. And I wrote about that many years ago, and basically what it boils down to is you can, and this is some numbers that, I don't know if y'all know who Spunky Braun is. She went under the name Spunky Homeschool for a long time.
I've heard, yeah.
I haven't.
Okay, so she did some math, and she said, basically, the short version is for $10,000 held in a 529, you're probably going to save $75. But $10,000 is a lot of money to tie up to save $75. Not many homeschool families are in that position, And so you put this $10,000 in your account and you draw from it for, tax-free homeschooling. And what it amounted to was a very small savings. But in exchange for that, homeschooling needs to be defined. And right now, the federal government doesn't have a definition for what homeschooling is. And I don't think we want that. I don't think we want the government to say...
That would be a bad thing.
Yeah. Because that's kind of like saying, let's define supper with your family.
Yes.
Here's how it should look.
Anytime we start asking for definitions and legality and regulation, it comes along with it. It's a slippery slope.
So I just don't think that the tax credit is worth it. And a lot of people will say, well, you're just negative. Well, I'm not.
You study history and...
Yeah, I understand how homeschooling works, and I understand how you can do it on no money at all, because I've done that before. And that's what I try to tell people is you don't need a $10,000 savings account to homeschool. If you've got one, awesome. You don't have to. And having to commit that money is not going to save you much money, but it is going to increase regulations. And so I don't know how much stock Trump is putting in that promise, but I'm going to fight it. I'm going to fight that because I don't think it's wise. As a lot of people have pointed out, this has already happened on the college level. It's very difficult to find a private college that is completely not funded by the government. Right. And it's hard to find a college that is not influenced by the government. And so that should
be... The two go hand in hand.
Yeah, if you have funding, you're going to have influence, of course.
That should give us all the information we need, honestly.
No, it really does. It does give you, when you're just... I think it's interesting in the perspective that everything we left the public school system for is not to be boxed in. We don't want to be defined. We don't want our homeschooling worlds to be defined. So then if you do define them, then that automatically just implements regulations or assessments, anything like that comes with it.
And let's just point out that the government is failing miserably when it comes to actually educating children.
Yes.
But they're the ones that want to impose standards on the homeschoolers.
Right.
It's just a vicious circle. We're trying to leave the system that's failing, but the failing system wants to be in charge of the people that left it. What in the world? Why do we want that?
I don't know. You don't want more regulation. But if we get rid of the Department of Education, which is a great idea because they've been trying to, it's just
been horrific
tons of money.
Since 1979, downhill.
And it really has not done anything at all.
It's only made things worse.
Exactly. Yes. But then you give the power to the states. If you're in a state like Arizona, where
right now we're teetering.
It's a little bit. It's especially like in the education department. It's pretty blue. I'm not gonna lie. They're very.
Oh, it is in Texas too.
Okay, then where I would be fearful of those people being in a place of power, to give power to the state.
It's kind of a catch-22 because it's like you really do want the power to go back to the states as it was intended.
We do.
But
we have to have elected officials that are going to be able to.
And you're going to have certain states that are going to, it's already almost impossible to homeschool in certain states. Technically it's still allowed, but they make it really darn hard.
They make them jump through hoops.
So, the question is that going to get even worse?
Yeah, do you anticipate more regulation moving forward? Because there's supposed to be a large exodus of kids. Like, homeschooling is going to go up exponentially.
Well,
again.
And the thing is, the people that are coming into homeschooling brand new don't understand the fight that got us this freedom. They don't know what it was like before it was even legal. And so they just think, hey, free education, we should be having that no matter where we go. When that's not true. For starters, it doesn't need to be free.
No.
But like I keep saying, if you're leaving, stop and ask yourself why, and then ask if you want those same people in charge of what you're doing at home. And so many people, I think, when they leave public school, they just think, and sometimes it depends on their reason. Maybe their reason is bullying and it has nothing to do with the oversight. They just think, I've got to get my kid out of that place. And they don't realize that there's so much more to homeschooling than just being in a different location.
Yes.
You pick better curriculum and you get to meet your child's needs physically and emotionally. And but they don't understand. And now, I don't even know if Arizona's done this, but several states that have started the ESAs are requiring any adult in the home to pass a background check in their home.
That has not started yet, but we did have an investigation, an Attorney General investigation was because it was basically an audit. I'm going to say it was like
an audit.
And, you had parents spending ESA funds on electronics and then selling them. Yeah. You had parents, But
again, if you look at history, any type of government funded handout program, if you really want to be specific, it's a handout. People are going to take advantage of it. It's human nature, and so unfortunately, the few
look into it.
Of course. I mean, rightfully so. When there's fraud happening, you're going to look into things. So unfortunately, some people ruin it for.
Well, and so did anyone
saw this coming?
Yes, I know. Exactly, right? This has happened before. Yeah. No, and so that act, we don't have background checks per se, but in that investigation, and I have to go see if they had like 60 days to report the Department of Ed. And so I don't know what has happened since then, but when I was reading through it, there was like a 3-part thing. So say this is Christina's my 5th grader. One of them was, if you're giving Christina that 5th grade curriculum, then you need to be able to prove that she can test at that 5th grade level or that you're teaching there. Well, right there is like, that's people coming into my home and testing my child.
Yes.
So that's regulations.
Yeah. And I don't know how that ended up, but.
Well, and, just to remind people that I don't know how Arizona looks, but most states are not even educating the public school kids to a 5th grade level. So,
oh no, they're not.
It's so ironic that they want to come and enforce that on homeschoolers who typically are testing above their grade level. So it's just crazy how they want to impose these standards. Well, Oklahoma, are you guys familiar with the Center for Responsible Home Education?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So you know that they're wackos.
I love her. Oh my gosh. No, it's so great. Yeah.
They are really infiltrating every state at the legislative level to impose restrictions. And I watched a video where they went to Oklahoma, and every state's having these hearings talking about school choice. And the girl from Center for Responsible Home Education, it was talking about the same thing: background checks, welfare checks, imposing vaccine mandates, even on homeschoolers. So what people need to understand is you will not even be a private parent in your own home, because it's not just about testing anymore that they want to do. It's not about grade level. They want to make sure you're parenting their way.
Their way. Yeah. Exactly.
It's going to go way beyond just the curriculum that you buy. And anybody that's all for parental rights really needs to sit up and pay attention. And if your state has not introduced this legislation, pay attention, because they will, or they have. Whatever the schedule is in your state, they're going to keep introducing it, and they're going to have the Center for Responsible Home Education is sending out their representatives to every state to testify. Corey DeAngelis will come and speak on behalf of the UNESCO. And
well, that's where it comes from. I was just going to name drop UNESCO. It is that is it, and it comes on trickles. Yes.
Yeah, it's not a grassroots thing at all.
No, it plays on people's heartstrings of, but we just want to make sure that kids are, that they'll pull the very few stories of abuse, and they're unfortunate, they're terrible, and yet there's significantly more stories of abuse in the public school systems too. But they gloss over that, and so they want to do it from that idea of, but we want to make sure that these parents are doing the right thing by their child. And it's like, that's pulling on people's heartstrings. And while that's nice, and of course we all want to make sure that no child is being abused in their home, what people don't realize is that massively slippery slope, that if you're doing that, if you're starting to say, I am going to input regulations on the home, now you are no longer parenting your own child. The government is parenting your child. Absolutely. And that's what people need to realize.
Well, and I think UNESCO even has it. If you go to their webpage, they have the way it is, like, everybody's entitled to, it's a human rights, for an education, to entitled, but what education exactly?
It's not. That's the thing. I know this will blow people's mind, but it's not a human right. No. It is a privilege to be educated. And it's a privilege that every parent, especially in America, can absolutely give their child. But it's not a right, and especially not the place of the government to say that it's a right.
No, it's not, and that's that sphere of control again. Like, biblically speaking, if we are upholding our Christian values, it's our job to raise our children up, not to give them to the government to raise them up. So there's a very big moral, discrepancy here.
Conundrum.
Yes,
it is. Well, and when you talk about the biblical mandate too, it's important for people to understand that if we are supposed to raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and to teach, all of the commands of the Lord, like Deuteronomy says, all day long, all night long, whatever you're doing, you're always instructing your children. You can't do that if they're at public school. And
No.
and then you can't do that if the government is determining how you parent.
No.
Because the government's not going to approve, I know some states are approving all the curriculum, but it's not going to last, and they're going to enforce more control as time goes on. But what you're trading, and a lot of Christians seem to think it's, it's Christian charity to push for vouchers, but what you're doing is trading your complete freedom for biblical discipleship for a check. You're just trading it for some money, and it is not worth it.
No, it's not. Not at all. Especially if, we can't see it now. We start to see those tentacles kind of approach, but forward thinking 5 years from now could look very different than it looks now, especially with the change in administration and all of this stuff happening in education. We can't predict it, but I definitely don't want to be on the side of I was helping this cause.
Yeah. Well, I think because of human nature, we can sort of predict it. And
I love it.
You see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just recently published an article called I Told You So, because I've been talking about this since about 2016. And the things that we didn't see yet, but we predicted are starting to happen. And, when people said, oh, they're not going to impose those restrictions on everybody, certain states took this ESA funding, giving it to some homeschoolers, but the restrictions, I don't think this has passed yet, but like West Virginia and Utah want to go ahead and impose control on all homeschoolers based on the little bit that they know about homeschoolers from ESA funding. So when people say, if you don't want the money, don't take the money, it's not going to affect you. I've been saying for years, oh, it will. It may not on the first day or the first year, but it will affect everyone, because homeschoolers don't do things the same way that the government thinks education should be done.
No.
And if we don't look normal to them, they're absolutely going to get involved and say, you're not doing it right, even though they're not doing it right. And they're failing miserably. It's the government. And they're going to come in and say, well, now that we see how homeschoolers operate, we've got to impose more restrictions on all of them because they're not doing what we think is right.
Yep.
And it's happening.
It is.
It's already happening, just like the smart homeschoolers were predicting several years ago. And so the writing is on the wall, and now we're starting to see the letters form. It's there, and we can watch the movie. We can go back.
No, we do.
And I think people don't realize how important this is. I mean, even just for our future generations to being able to homeschool. Our kids already know that they're like, we want to homeschool our own children. And like, will they have the ability? Will they have the right to homeschool their own children in the way in which they think is most appropriate?
Yep. Because
it's scary.
We may have, Trump is trying to do a lot of really awesome things, and I'm excited about all the agencies he wants to shut down or overturn or whatever. But the pendulum swings back and forth.
Yes, it does.
So we don't know what will happen in 4 more years or 10 years or 20 years when our kids are trying to raise our grandkids. And so we've got to fight now, just like my parents fought back in the 80s. We've got to be doing it now. We've got to keep thinking about our grandchildren and their grandchildren. And it's the way the world goes, things are looking more and more disturbing. The culture is very ugly, and homeschooling is one of the most important ways to get your kids out of that culture
and combat that
for as long as possible.
Yep.
And I think you hit on a really important point, is that so many people are just so focused on the now, and like, well, I'm good.
Constant.
My kids, and it's like, I could easily say, like, I have 4 more years of homeschooling. So you know what? In my 4 years of homeschooling, is really anything going to affect me? Probably not.
Right.
But it's not about my 4 more years of homeschooling. It's about my children and them wanting to homeschool their children, and then hopefully continue that down generations that we have to think about. Like, I think too many people focus on, but it's not affecting me now.
Right. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, I'm thinking back to Alex. So I've listened to a lot of, I'm here and he's here. In respect to that, he's very, very bright. But a lot of what he talks about, especially in his last book, is that, Sweden populace-wise is different than the U.S., but at the same level, like state by state, rolling this out state by state, it can be comparable, and they didn't think it was going to affect them. And then next thing you know, you've got CPS in people's houses, and they're mandating, and then homeschooling's illegal. Yep. And it just was pshoosh, and then you have people fleeing to Finland because it is, and so I don't want that. No. And we need a petition, Nicki, and we need to scream it from the rooftops or something.
We need more people to do exactly what we're trying to do here, is get the word out that it's not just about, it's not just about the money. It's not just about your particular homeschool journey. It's a much broader topic that we all
freedom. If we all want those freedoms, then we need to make sure that we don't have anything encroaching on that freedom.
Absolutely. And another thing that gets me is how many conservatives, so-called, will still think it's okay because, we talked about the tax thing. Well, I pay the money in, and they're basically saying, I'm so used to it, just give me my part, and instead of fighting the taxation, why don't we do that?
I don't know.
That would also help future generations, or... like I said, some Christians will use that as an excuse to get kids out of public school, but it's not the job of the government to help the poor or to help the needy, even though that's what we're used to now. It's the job of the church. Yes. So Christians and Christian families and churches can and should step up and provide a way out instead of saying, let's take the government's money and provide a way out.
Yeah.
And create a situation where, again, but human nature is going to defraud it, and it just can't. It doesn't work on a government level. It never has.
But so many churches are quiet. They're very quiet. Yeah. This is my pessimism about that, and they really should be much louder and have a very, very big voice in this.
I agree.
In my opinion. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
All right. So
homeschooling is going to increase, but we still need to be aware of regulation. I mean, in general, moving forward. That's what my feeling is on that.
Agree.
Oh yeah, I want it to increase. That's my answer when I wrote a book on it, that anyone can homeschool, and I wrote it in response to this. What do you do to get your kids out of the failing public schools? Then if I can't have a check, then what are we supposed to do? And so my whole goal is to help people understand you can do it anyway. You don't need the government check. And without that government check, you have all kinds of freedom to be a single mom or a working mom, or to have children with special needs, or all the different things that maybe people think is an obstacle. My goal is always to say, nope, you can do this in any way you need to, because you are just parenting. And you're ordering
just parenting. It is good parenting. Yep.
It is. And it's not, and so my goal is to help people understand you're not doing public school at home. No. You are raising your kids. And if you look at it that way, then you realize you can do this. Anybody can do it. So just take your kids out of the public school, order some books, and talk to some local homeschoolers, start reading how it works, and just do it. That's my goal always, is just to say, get them out and figure it out from there. And it's not that hard.
No, it isn't. There's a lot of worry, though, with new homeschooling families. And
I have to get it right from the start.
We talk about this. They jump right in, and we're like, no, take some time off, because they're conditioned to thinking that they have to do all this one way. And it's very hard to get them out of that box.
So the failing way, by the way.
This wasn't working for your child, and now you're going to continue that pattern.
Right.
Exactly.
Don't copy that. Don't copy that at all.
No.
Everything you hated, quit trying to do it. It's the American way, though. That's how everybody's been raised, and so it's hard to get out of that mindset.
Yeah. So I have a question, kind of circling back to your kids. Do they have interest past high school? Are they involved in anything? What did their future educational lives look like?
Well, to start, I'll say that we do not push college degrees.
Neither do we.
Neither do we.
We're in the same,
unless they needed it for something very
Right.
specific, we encourage them to stay away from universities, honestly.
Yeah.
And even in homeschool circles, that's still a little bit
Oh yeah.
Oh,
not very popular. But all you have to do is look at what's coming out of universities. And I've seen many homeschool kids raised in Christian homes go into university and come out the opposite. And, why pay thousands of dollars for that if you don't,
Need
why?
it?
No.
You know
If
what
you're not
the
going into
outcome
a
is gonna
career that
be.
requires it, right?
Yeah. And so for my kids, my oldest thought she wanted to do culinary school because she loved to cook and decorate cakes. And so she tried that for a year, and she realized all they're doing is making me sit in a classroom. And so she gave up on that. So she works full time. And then my second daughter is married and has 2 children. So she is a stay-at-home mom, and that's all she plans to do. And I fully support that.
Yes.
She's got 2 children that are 3 and 1. So I have 2 grandbabies now.
Aw.
And by the way, she married a lifetime homeschooler also. So
that's awesome.
yeah, so I see that a lot in my area because there are decades of homeschooling history here where I live. And so there are so many couples. I try to keep track of them so I can count and give the number, but over 20 couples in our area that both the husband and wife grew up homeschooled, married each other. Now they're raising kids who are homeschooled. So
did they meet through like a co-op, or how did they get to? Yeah,
That's great.
Most of them met in the co-op that we still belong to. It's been around.
So some
for
of our
20
kids might grow up.
Yes,
We might have some connections.
that's where my daughter met her husband. So
That's super neat.
that's pretty fun. And then my third child, which is a boy, he is about to turn 19 next week, and he works right now, but he has always leaned towards architecture. And so he's still toying with it, but he knows it's a lot of schooling, so he's not sure if he wants to commit. So we're not sure, but he said he would absolutely do it from home online instead of going anywhere.
And I think that's the great thing. There's so many opportunities that are available to our children that were never available to us. And it's such a different generation of like, we grew up in that generation of, but you have to go to college and you have to do this and you have to do that. And the kids nowadays have so many more opportunities.
Which is great because then you don't wake up after your college education and never use it or be in debt. And and just telling them that, you know what, you don't actually have to know what you're doing when you're 17 and graduating and have to jump into it. Sometimes you need to just figure things out.
People don't know, and then they just jump in because they feel like they have to. And I did that. I went and got a business degree because I thought I have to do something. Yes. So that's what I did. Business felt very generic, and so I have a business degree. But I so wish I had taken more time to think it through and done something else. But this son that I'm talking about actually graduated a year early from homeschooling, but he didn't know for sure what he wanted to do, and so he worked in construction. He's learned a lot about that.
That's fantastic.
For years, and so he keeps going back to the possibility of architecture school. But I told him, I said, now it's so easy to clip out of classes, even online. Just take the test and not mess around with all those classes. So anyway, that's what he's thinking about still. And then my 2 younger ones, not sure. My youngest is a girl. She's 13, and she talks a lot about cosmetology.
It sounds like summer. It's so funny. My daughter.
I think every 13-year-old girl talks about that. So I don't know what she'll end up doing.
I took Summer for her. She just turned 11, and I was like, "Let's go get her nails done." And she's like, "Mom,
this is what I want to
do this for the rest of my life."
Yeah,
that's all right. My 13-year-old boy keeps toying between he wants to run a tea shop because he loves tea, and he wants to own a nursery because he loves like cactus and citrus fruits and all that. I'm like, all right,
a nursery to tea table.
Well, actually, he wants to own like an entire strip mall so that the other people can pay for his tea shop and his nursery. We do real estate. Can you tell?
That's very smart. Well, that's one thing we do encourage a lot is for kids to be entrepreneurs. And so whatever that looks like, be your own boss. We've tried to encourage them to learn about day trading. That's something my husband does. And so whatever we learn, we try to tell them, like, here's another option too, so you don't have to go work for the man.
Exactly.
In
Oh
fact,
yeah, we're all
another,
about entrepreneurship here.
yes.
Yes.
That's another cool thing about all of these homeschooled married couples that I've mentioned. At least half or more have started their own companies too. And so it's just really cool to see once you exit the system, you keep exiting more and more and more until
you start seeing it everywhere, and you're like, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
I was going to go down my conspiracy bubble. I actually think that this is why homeschooling is so, like, they want to control it so much, is because they can't. Sorry, we're getting countdowns here, and it's so distracting. It's okay.
For ADHD.
So they can't control homeschoolers, and they all become business owners. And then, yes, but they want to be able, because they want people in the workforce. They want this, like, human capital.
And we don't want to be in that workforce.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's the rabbit hole we didn't even go down. Is
I know.
All that other stuff that's involved in pushing school choice. They need us to stay in the system.
Yes.
They need our kids so they can harvest their data, all of that stuff.
I was going to say data mining, and I was like, do we go into data mining in ESA? But it is a huge part of it.
It is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
It is. It's a very huge part of it. And just like, I don't know about y'all, but I've raised my kids mostly outside of the medical system too.
Yes.
They haven't been vaccinated. They were born at home, and as often as possible, we treat at home unless there's an emergency. And so that's not one more way that we're not part of the system. And as my kids become older, I try to help them understand, here's what we've always done and here's why. And now that you are grown, here's what you can do with that, and then it's up to them. But it's that independent mindset that just keeps growing. Once you exit one system, you start looking at all the other ones and thinking, maybe
how do I get out of there?
Yeah. But they want to keep kids in the public school system, so they have worker bees. They have to have worker bees. Yep.
That's right.
That is very true. Okay. That was awesome and so much stuff. And what's our next question on? Yes. We do have, we didn't do this one.
What kind of?
What do you think homeschooling families should be doing more of to make sure that homeschooling stays free, like every day? Besides us speaking out.
Which is huge.
Which is big.
So this is, a lot of homeschoolers do this, but not nearly enough. And this is stay politically aware, because that's where the rights are protected or taken away, is in politics. And I know for people that are not politically active, it's overwhelming and confusing and boring, but it's really not that hard. And when, like right now, Texas, the new House and Congress in Austin they're filing bills right now for the next session. So, talk to someone that's already active in politics and say, show me how to read the bills.
Yep.
And show me how to find the bills, and just jump in. Just get to know the language in a bill and how to go onto your state's website and see what's happening with the bill. Perhaps go testify on behalf of a bill or against one, or just join a local group in your area that is involved. And whether it's your state homeschool organization or somebody that knows how to stay aware, understand the language, and then fight. Whether you send out emails to your friends and say, please contact your senator about this bill number, or get involved yourself and go testify. Call your senators and representatives, write them some emails. That is the other thing. They need to hear your voice in your state legislature. And then, of course, if this becomes federal, which it's always being introduced at the federal level too.
Yeah.
Go ahead and talk to your United States Senator and your House Rep in Washington, D.C. If you don't know who they are, ask a friend. Start wherever you need to, but please get involved with politics, because that's where this is happening.
Yep.
That is great advice.
It's so funny because so much of the talk is that politics and education shouldn't be. I have people that ask to join our homeschool group here in Tucson, and they're like, are you guys political? Because you shouldn't be. And I was like, you can't have one without the other. What are you
have
about?
To be. Like,
of
you
course
truly, if you want to advocate for children, if you want to advocate for homeschooling, you have to be political. Yep. Absolutely.
Because the people that are on the other side are very political. And so they're going to use politics against your children. So you've got to fight back the same way.
Hey, I'm voting for her for head of education.
Yeah, can we have?
I will shut it down.
I love it.
I love it.
We think we need a Department of Homeschool Advocacy.
Yeah.
We won't tell you how to homeschool, but we're going to encourage you to do it. Right?
Okay, I'll do that one. Yeah.
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right. Do we have anything to wrap it up here?
I think we've asked all our questions. Is there anything else that you want to share and get across?
Besides what's happening.
Gosh, I think we hit everything.
I could talk for another hour.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, in a nutshell, the answer to bad public school is not more public school. And that's what government vouchers are. It's just, it's a monopoly. The government will have a monopoly over all education if we give them this freedom. And so, however appealing a check sounds, resist the urge to become part of the public school system again.
Yep.
And if you need help homeschooling, I can help. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I just want to help people understand it's not hard, it's not expensive. Just be a mom and a dad and take over your child's upbringing. That's
it. And then just be in tune with them, because you don't need everything else to homeschool your kids.
No.
You just need to know them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome, Nicki.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It was
Can
fun.
we call on you again to, because I feel like the next 5 years, next 6 months.
The next 6 months are going to be critical.
It's going to be crazy. And
Yeah.
then,
I'm
we
kind of excited about it, but yeah.
It is. It's exciting because I do feel like we're headed in a good direction. The question is how far in that direction are we going to be able to go?
Yes.
Will we make it? Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. Yes, I would love to come back on.
Okay. Okay. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Join the revolution, guys. We are 5 million homeschoolers in the U.S. and growing, breaking down the walls of institutionalized learning.
And remember, if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and most importantly, share with others and help us get the word out about the beauty and freedom of homeschooling.
And speak up. Go grab yourself some cool merch that we designed while you're at it.
See you next time.